about the film emulation tool Dehancer, which is a plugin available for Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture One and Affinity as a photo editing tool, and for Final Cut, Premiere and DaVinci Resolve as a video editing tool. So just for full disclosure, they have asked me to review their product, but I'm free to say whatever I want and I'm not getting paid for that. And before I forget to mention, you can get a 10% discount on Dehancer with the promo code LICHTE10. I heard about Dehancer before and was curious to try it myself because just recently I tried to create some Lightroom presets which should mimic the color rendering of 35mm film. And even though my results were not bad, Dehancer is a professional tool and obviously way more precise than these presets, and it also has some features which you cannot recreate in Lightroom or Photoshop without the plugin. But I'm gonna get to that later. First of all, I want to start with my favorite use case of Dehancer, which is combining it with some old-fashioned point-and-shoot cameras. During the last year, I got my hands on some of these older digital cameras and they're just great to carry around because of their small size, and I think the look of these older point-and-shoot cameras is quite different compared to smartphone pictures without the cost and hassle of film development and scanning. But to bring the look of these older point-and-shoot cameras on a level where I'm basically not missing film point-and-shoots anymore is where Dehancer comes into play. If you're adding the film emulations on the low megapixel JPEGs, it really adds a layer of nostalgia, and especially the pictures shot with the flash, they're just looking like the typical point-and-shoot film snapshots. So what are these layers that create this kind of look? There are three characteristics which play a substantial part of achieving the classical film look, and these are film grain, halation and bloom. Digital film grain isn't something new actually, and as you probably already know, it is also available in many photo editing tools, but there are differences in the quality of the grain. If we compare the grain from Lightroom to the grain in Dehancer, I would always prefer the result from Dehancer actually. It may be hard to see the differences in a YouTube video because of the compression, but you can download and try Dehancer yourself. If you try it for free, it comes with a watermark, but I think it's a good option to give it a try before finally purchasing it. So talking about grain in Dehancer, you actually have more options to adjust the grain to your personal preferences, which I really like because too much grain can easily look fake, and here you can make some precise adjustments. But let's get to my favorite tools, which are halation and bloom. This is a very simplified explanation, but halation is basically red light which gets reflected and becomes visible on the borders of objects. In some light situations it can be more pronounced than in others, and you might notice it mostly on glowing objects or with some sort of direct or reflected light. The other effect, bloom, creates a glowing shimmer around highlights, which you are probably familiar with from promised filters. I think I have already mentioned that Dehancer is a film emulation tool, but you don't have to make everything look like film actually. That is why I often use these features like halation and bloom and the film colors without the grain to give my pictures some sort of these imperfections without making them look like film. Despite the point-and-shoot being my personal favorite use case for Dehancer, this film emulation tool is definitely capable of more, and even for professional work. So one thing I was really keen on when Dehancer gave me the option to try that tool is to use the film look on some of my landscape pictures. So let's take a look how some of my favorite film stocks perform with the Dehancer plugin in Lightroom. As I already mentioned, editing with Dehancer is fairly easy, but there is one thing which you should be aware of. Dehancer gives your photographs a finishing touch, but the base should be a good exposed photograph. So if your photo is underexposed, I suggest you to fix that in Lightroom before applying the Dehancer plugin. When I edited the raw files, I used Lightroom for the basic adjustments like exposure, white balance and contrast. But when I was working with JPEGs, I didn't make any adjustments in Lightroom and directly opened Dehancer. I'm just going to show you how I'm handling my raw files before editing in Dehancer. So what I'm basically doing is to set the exposure right, because you're usually underexposing raw files and we want to fix this to a level on how you would have exposed a film negative. So over here I'm opening the shadows and pushing the blacks down to get some contrast back, because with film we would have exposed for the shadows as well. As you can see, these are really just some basic adjustments, and then I'm opening the edited file in Dehancer. Here you can choose and experiment with all these film emulations based on real film stocks. There are really quite a lot of them, as you can see, and some of which I have never heard from. I saved my favorites already as a preset with some personal adjustments, so I'm just going to pick one of them and that's it. So the results you can get with Dehancer are really solid, and that does not only apply for photo editing but also for video editing. And for video editing, a good working film emulation is actually much more important than for photography, because the entry costs of film photography are much lower compared to shooting real motion picture film. You can still get some analog DSLRs or point-and-shoot cameras for way less than €100, but if you want to shoot motion picture with real film cameras and make a decent project out of it, you have to spend a lot of money. That is the reason why I think the video editing features of Dehancer are a real game changer. So this whole video has been edited with the film emulation, and what I basically did to get this look is that I just converted the footage to Rec. 709 and applied one of the film emulations. Then I'm adding some halation and bloom, and just like the photo editing, that's about it. You can add some grain of course, which gives the final touch to make it more look like real film. But my personal preference is to use grain only very subtle or not at all. So I want to talk about a specific situation where Dehancer really comes in handy. One problem I had was that I had no option to mount a Pro Mist filter on my drone, and the cut from camera footage with the filter and drone footage without was quite harsh. But if we apply the bloom effect on the drone footage, it comes quite close to the Pro Mist filter. So because you cannot mount a vintage lens or a mist filter on most drones, Dehancer is, as far as I know, the only tool which can help to make the drone footage appear a little less digital. Summing it up, it is hard to find something to criticize about Dehancer, as it is quite easy to use and it has a lot of features which you don't get in any other film emulation tool, as far as I know. The only downside is that the entry price for someone who would only use it for fun is quite substantial. But I already mentioned that if you are using it instead of film, it is only a matter of time until you start to save some money with it. For a professional use case, I would actually say it's almost a no-brainer. So let's say you are a fashion photographer who wants to shoot digital but you still want to maintain the film-like character, then this is probably the best option out there. Not only because of the results you can get with it, but also because of the time you can save compared to working with real film. Another positive aspect is that Dehancer provides a lot of information about how all these different effects and sliders are working. They have a blog where you can find explanations and very useful example pictures, so you don't have to play around with the sliders to find out what each of them is actually doing. Despite that, you can save your favorite adjustments as a preset to make your workflow even quicker. Last but not least, if you know how to use Dehancer in Lightroom, you also know how to use it in Final Cut and all the other programs. So you can match the look of your video quite easily to the look of your photographs if you're using Dehancer for both of them. So that's it for now. As always, thank you a lot for watching, and don't forget to use the promo code LICHTE10 if you want to add Dehancer to your workflow. I wish you all the best for the next year and see you next time. Tschüss!